Welcome back to the Brother Show. I'm your host, KMO. I haven't seen you guys in a while, but tonight we have a special guest. And with that special guest, we have a hot topic. So we'll be back in 1 second. All right. Welcome back to the Brother Show. I'm your host, KMO. This evening, we have a special guest, somebody I've been trying to get on for quite some time. He's been super busy. I'm doing his thing, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. But welcome back to the show. He's been on my podcast before, talking real good stuff about men of color, how we get ourselves together. He's been a huge impact in my life, and we'll talk about our relationship in a minute. But welcome to the show, Rio.
Hello, how's it going, everyone?
What's going on, man? Tell everybody who you are, man.
So I'm Rio. I'm a financial payments exec and entrepreneur, and but most importantly, I am a husband and a father of two.
So let's tell the people. So tonight we'll be talking about um, how to creating a space for love and initial dating. Right? We know that this is something that we've both done quite some time of, but you haven't done as much as I have. But if you can kind of take us take us back a couple of years, so you can really talk to our listeners and viewers about what that looks like. But we'll start off on how our relationship kind of started. So for the longest, I would say in our relationship as friends, brothers, and just men who've always been. I consider you somebody that's held me accountable in so many different ways, and I owe a lot of my development as a young man and a man to you, to see how you went from 1 point to 2 points to 3 points to 4 points in your life as a man, but also growing. And so I think that one of the things that I always try to tell people, you don't necessarily have to go through it to see if you have people around you. I think God works in so many different ways where he can be blessed and you can see the outcome of that. So
Mhm.
I think with our relationship, I appreciate it in so many different in manners, and I've told you this offline, but I also will say it to our listeners. We have to continue to have brothers around us with who are going to sharpen each other. So I consider you want to be one of those folks in my life that sharpened me, that I've seen, that I've looked through, gone through hard times as a man, and is continuing to grow as an individual. So our relationship has been like that. We went from hanging out to as young men to understanding how to mature into that next phase of life. And so
Mhm.
that next phase of life has, I think, flourished a lot for you, and our listeners will hear that tonight, as well as with this hot topic when it talks about relationships. One of the things that we try to do at the Brother to Brother show is not sugarcoat anything, to not bash women, not to bash men either, but also to have a healthy conversation of how we both can go on both sides and come together and build a stronger community. So
Mhm.
I just talked about our relationship. If you want to say anything about it, you're welcome to do so, and we can tell our stories.
Yeah, I think just the years and stuff that we've been connected. I think has been like a growth period for the both of us, and I think through experience and watching others experience, we've been able to to continue to grow as men, and I think that's really important. Like I think one of the things that sometimes you can make a mistake on is not being intentional. And you'll hear me use that term a lot tonight, because I think, you have to live your life. And there's this thing about, living a purposeful life. And I've always tried to live a purposeful life. And so that also includes like the people who you have in your circle. And so, Kim kind of mentioned that earlier. Which is like making sure that that you protect that space and making sure that you have the right people around you, when you building your village, that village is something that is uplifting, supportive, but also it gives you motivation because you're seeing growth within the village as well. And so making sure you have that. And so I think we've always been able to kind of have that and nurture that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, that's one of the beautiful things about the relationship.
Yeah. And so I'll go and talk about a little bit of my story. I haven't been on live for quite some time, but my story is being KMO life coach, relationship coach, also somebody who can do this podcast, talk to talk to men, try to bring certain things out of men so they can cultivate and create those feelings, and also be able to feel comfortable enough to talk about those feelings, because as especially men of color, we have been taught to not express our feelings. As we go into a world now where feelings are kind of more accepted, for some reason our feelings aren't being accepted as much, and because we haven't been able to been given a platform, or a for a long period of time a comfortable space to actually talk about our feelings and not be shunned and talked about. I think it's something that people haven't heard for so long or at all, that it's sprung up a lot of conversation. So in my story, Tomorrow's Men is our company, and we talk about life coaching, and it's something that was came from my mom's vision with young African American men, to try to help them grow, to understand their feelings, and to understand their past and the history where they came from and where we are now. So with that, I took that title, brought it into this space so we can continue to have those conversations with men of color and also other men, so that we can push that narrative of having comfortable conversations and it be received on a lot of different fronts. So tonight we'll be talking about creating a space for love in the initial dating. So for myself, um, dating was very easy, and fun for me, and I think a lot of men, it was fun for them when they first started. But that as they grew into manhood, as they understood who they were as an individual, growing into that and being loved, and to understand what that initial dating looks like, that's very hard. And so especially going into a transitioning into a world now where I would personally say strong love and healthy relationships aren't really glorified in the media as it once was, because everybody has their own sense of understanding of what that is, and that's fine. But I think a lot of times when we, especially for myself going out into the dating world, there's so many different facets of what love looks like in initial dating space, that there's no guide to understand how to have a healthy relationship. So Rio, what about you, man? What can you say on that topic?
Yeah, I think I think that, one of the things that's like, really true, I think about just human relationships and is that, we tend to isolate our personal relationships to only being us. Like, this is only happening to me or no one else can understand. I think that's like a big mistake, especially when it comes to African American relationships. I think one of those things that I've tried to really, speak some truth into other brothers and sisters, but primarily in talking about men, is the ability to communicate and talk through, issues and relationships, problems, and one of the things that we tend not to talk about a lot of is feelings, right?
Mm,
And so I think it's important that within that community that everyone has a space in which they can kind of talk about how they're feeling about something, and because you never know where that connecting point happens, where someone else may be going through a similar thing, and that
mhm,
might help you out in
mhm.
your relationships as well. And so that's one of the things I think I want to kind of point out there.
Okay. And what about your dating? When you think back to the dating, initially dating, what would you say that experience was for you when you initially dated, or what headspace were you in?
For me, dating has always been something that it was always easy. Like, because I always went into a particular period of my life like intentional. And even if it was like, hey, I'm not ready to be in anything committed, and I was always upfront and honest with, anyone who I would pursue. And so because I always went in with that, it was always fairly easy for me, like to date, right? And I think, that didn't mean that I didn't have any lessons, any like hardships, because I definitely had hardships even during those period of my life. But those are all like very, very important lessons for me. And I think, I was able to recover from all of those situations because, I always stay positive, and I know I always had the best intent in any of the situations itself. And so, I haven't dated I haven't dated outside of my current relationship in
Hmm.
a while, right? And
Right.
so I continue to date, even though I'm married. My wife and I continue to date.
Hmm.
And so I think that's like, I think a lot of times people associate dating with singleness,
Right.
and that's not true. Like dating is an act. And so my
Hmm.
wife and I steadily date, and we have a great time at dating, right? And of course, I'm dating with intention, with her because the intention is different because she's my life partner.
Right.
But but when I was single and I was dating, one thing that I laugh about because I think it's just the way my life goes is like I would go in even during the time where I said, "Hey, I'm not looking for anything serious." I
Right.
always ended up with persons who then turned wanted to be serious.
Yeah.
Right, like,
Exactly.
even if it was, like, an initial conversation and we were like, "Yeah, we're both in the same place, and we're
Hmm.
not neither one of us are looking for that," but eventually they were like, "Hey, have some thought, and, things are going so great with us, what would you say about us being, monogamous and, and being in a serious relationship?" And that wasn't
Right.
where I was, right? So,
Hmm.
I would have to always have the really hard conversation, and I try to leave every situation in a good space. And so I've always wanted to make sure that I'm honest with that situation. But I think that's oftentimes like something that men get in trouble with as well because they're not
Hmm.
having the conversation,
Yeah.
like, and they're maybe telling a person that what they want to hear because they either a like the physical relationship that they're having, or
Right.
they don't want to be mean and hurt someone's feelings,
Hmm.
or they're just afraid to have the conversation and they don't want to, like they don't want to have any conflict to it, and so they just
Hmm.
keep kind
Hmm.
of buying time. Um, and I think for me, I just kind of hit it dead on. Let's have the conversation now, whether that meant like, hey, we're gonna then leave this relationship by being friends, remaining friends, and then but we no longer have a physical relationship. And I would say 99% of the time, it always worked out, really
Right.
well.
Right.
So again, I think that's one of those things that I think are like super duper important when it comes to like dating is one, you should be dating with intention. That doesn't mean that you have to be dating to find a wife. It just
Right.
means that what you're doing is intentional and you're making sure that you're being honest and you're being upfront with what that intention is.
So, with people who are trying to be in committed relationships, or I mean, I heard you say earlier about you always came to the table with that in the first and foremost, with most, with women. Um, with where we are now, like, where do you think this went wrong, and how do we even get here? How do you believe that we got to this place where love that we see or initial dating is not even a thing anymore, right? It
Mhm.
goes, they jump right into it. Why do you feel like the dating with your wife now is so important? What is the goal for that? Because that's some this, I guess I understand what you mean as far as you continue to date for the purpose of build from my standpoint, continue the relationship, continue you all get to know each other as you all grow in different spaces,
Yep.
continue to this be have a connection because you
Yep.
all, you still do have a family.
Mhm.
Why do you do that with having children? Nothing, you have two boys, a wife, and family around. Like, why is that so important? And how can you connect that to maybe like, again, where do we go wrong in this?
Well, I think just for us, I mean, we started out as friends, so I genuinely enjoy spending time with her. I mean, we have a lot of fun together. And I think, she is, a beautiful woman, and it's nice to go out on a date with a beautiful woman. Um, but the serious part about it is that, people evolve and change. And so I want to make sure that I'm up to date with anything that my spouse and my partner has going on in her life. And, I want to be aware of the changes as they occur. And I want to make sure that, like, it's the person that I know. So I don't want to one day wake up and then this person, I don't know this person because
Hmm.
we're not dating, we're not spending significant time, we're
Hmm.
not having conversations, we're not planning together.
Right.
Like when we're on date, sometimes it's just a completely fun date. We're not talking about anything related to the family,
Hmm.
and like we're getting to know each other as if we were on the first date. And there are other times where we intentionally go on dates. We just had one. We were intentionally going on a date just to have, a discussion over drinks, about a particular topic or,
Hmm. Hmm.
something we're trying to do in the future or that sort of
Hmm.
thing. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
I think, I like the person that I'm with.
Hmm.
So, I think that's the first thing as well is like, if you're with someone that, you don't often like, then you're not going to really want to spend that kind of time with them.
Right.
And so I think that that's a start to the detriment of a relationship. But getting back to what your initial thing was, is just like where did we go wrong? I think this is a different time. I think that the influence of like social media,
Mm.
um, the
Because you all met during the time where social media was kind of just starting
just
to kind of
starting.
ramp up. Yeah, it wasn't like a time where, I mean, still social media was there, but
Hmm.
Instagram hadn't really hit the way it
Yeah.
is now.
Yeah.
Um,
Online dating had just started. Like all of that
mhm.
stuff had just started. Um, But, I think there's so much that captures the attention now where
Mhm.
I think people are so busy imaging, like making sure that their image is,
Mhm.
acceptable online, and like they have this persona online is so tight,
Mhm.
that they're so worried about that
Right.
they don't have time to invest in someone else. Like
Mm.
where, and because like relationships are truly, no matter if it's like romantic or not, like
Mhm.
it's an investment in time,
Right.
right? It's an investment in emotion, right? And so I think that that's where we've lost that.
Mhm.
Right, we want everything to be so automatic now.
Mhm.
We believe that like we're gonna step out the door and Mr. Charming is gonna be right there and
Yep.
sweep us off our
Exactly.
feet
Right.
without any work, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I think that that's where a lot has gone wrong because I think it's, whether you, and then it's like there's so many choices. So like,
Mhm.
I can only imagine if I'm online and I'm meeting 10 to 20 different people per week, like, one instance of a person that I disagree with, I can just move to the next person.
Right.
And I think having that freedom and flexibility sometimes causes, like,
You blinding you from who that person really is, possibly.
correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're not even having the time to develop,
Mhm.
a
Mhm. Mhm.
relationship, right? And I think there's just so much impatience to dating today, that I think people need to really take a step back, and I would even encourage people when you're in a relationship, take a step back from social media,
Mm.
right? Because I think what happens is when you have a lot of time, either to yourself or in a relationship with someone,
Mhm. Mhm.
minus like so much concentration on social media, you can really understand, like, do I even really want to like to be around this person? Like,
Mhm.
is this somebody who I feel compelled to do something special for? Like, would I be okay with going on like a picnic with no phones, just us conversation,
Mhm.
right? Nature. Like, is this the person who I want to be around? And I think, if we did those kinds of exercises, like I think you would eliminate a lot of the people who we kind of meet online,
Mhm.
because it's just so many. But,
Try
so
to
I
try
think
to
that's,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Try to go back to, because now we're, I thought about this as one of the questions that we had here, like how do we educate others? But what's one of the things, if you think about, 'cause, I think we both talked about therapy. We also
Hmm.
are both align with mental health and understand how important it is for both parties to have that, to come to a situation whole. That doesn't, and whole doesn't mean that you're perfect. Just
Yeah,
understanding how you can have be able to both have lines of a certain level of communication and understanding. Talk, because I know, and I'm not sure if you're okay with sharing this. Talk about the education that you had to have to go through,
yeah.
and both you and your partner had to go through, and what you learned. Maybe one or two things that you can share that you feel like ties into how we can educate other people on how to initially love and start this dating process. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think for me, what really helped me out, like I've again, like I said before, I always found myself in relationships, you know, even when I wanted to kind of just date, like it follows me. Um, but I remember early on in committed relationship I was in, and things weren't clicking, and it was we were going through couples therapy, and we needed to have couples therapy, not just because we were fighting so much. We were just trying to figure out there was something there, right? That was off. And without going into like a lot of detail, it was in the couples therapy. I remember, and I still remember this day, is I remember the therapist saying to us, like, "Hey, have you guys ever thought about individual therapy?" And one of those things that I had never thought about that beforehand, like, black male, like that's in the black community, that isn't something that we traditionally seek. Um, and we both went out and got uh, single therapy, and in that we made so many different discoveries about each other, and so much so that we decided to part ways because there were life changing sort of you know um, things that came out of the therapy, right? And she decided that she wanted to live this certain life, that was not compatible with what I the life that I wanted to live. But we were able to amicably like split, and still being friends today. And she's super happy with the life and the path that she's taken, and I'm super happy with the life and the path that I've taken. But going to uh, personal therapy really helped me identify internally, and so there were things that I needed to do internally to either A, heal, right, to grow, and to really focus on to prepare myself to be with someone else, right? And it wasn't even about, Mario, you need to prepare yourself like to be with someone else. It really, really was about just making myself a better person for me. Like so I could be happy, fully happy. And then I can also see and realize, like when there's somebody for me or when there is not someone for me. And it made me such a better person, I think, to date. And I think that that is one thing that I recommend all the time. Like when I'm talking to someone, I'm talking to a couple, or I'm like, listen, there is completely nothing wrong with therapy. Like I think if you both couple,
Mm-hmm.
and individual therapy, I would say that first go to individual therapy so you can learn about yourself, because
Right.
what the therapist was telling us was that when you go to therapy, there's no right or wrong. It's literally couples therapy is about the relationship.
Right.
But what
Mm-hmm.
comes out of couples therapy typically are
It's individual,
individual
visual things.
aspects
Yep.
that is
Mm-hmm.
impacting the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
the first thing couples do when they get to therapy is say, "Well, they did this, oh,
Right.
they did this," or and I'm not, and that is not
Uh-huh.
that, like, the couples therapy is not there to resolve that. They're there, their literal purpose is about the relationship. And so if there's even one party that is not for the relationship, couples therapy won't work.
Right.
Right, and so you go individual therapy, you heal, you find the place where you can continue to grow yourself. Then you come to the table with couples therapy, and then it could be about, okay, how do we combine this personality and this personality
Right. Right.
together for the sake of the relationship? So I that's one thing I'm like, I stand on completely, just because I think, especially in the African American community, unfortunately, there's a lot of trauma from our upbringing, just because of the makeup of the African American community, and that we need to resolve.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I co-sign with that, and I didn't know where you were going with that at first, but even like even because we're going to get into it in a minute about the like, is there any coming back to people seriously dating for marriage, right? And I know you and I have talked about this offline, and I think I know what you're going to say on the camera, but at the same time, I know we have had private conversations. I believe it's going to be super hard, right? Because I think it's that 15% of people who are
Yeah.
seriously trying to do that work that you just mentioned. And every time I've gone to I remember going to my sister's wedding. You were there. That was what, almost 15 years ago,
Hmm.
and seeing, listening to the pastor talk about both the sands coming together. Each person have their own sand, right? And they're pouring the sand in that big jar. And if now what you're doing, this sand that's come together, that is the relationship. There is no you and you're a person. It's about the relationship. And so I kind of look at even how you go into initially dating the same way. Like we're both going to have our own views on certain things, but if I'm not here stepping out of what's for me and not looking at the other person to me, as I'm looking at trying to do something for the other person and how I can show up for that person, is not necessarily is me being selfless, but it's also that jar of sand. It's about the relationship. And
Hmm.
I don't know if people go into it like that. People are very selfish. People are just very into themselves and things of that nature. But I never forget what that done to me, to think about being, not just being a selfless person already, but to really go into that and really try to like maximize that and how I can help this person. Because if I help this person, this is helping the relationship. And if they're doing the same thing, we're both helping each other, but it's not helping each other, it's helping the relationship grow.
Hmm.
So I think that's going back to even your dating situation. Like as we date, you always are dating. You have to date for the rest of your life. And I think some people look at it as, well, I don't have the time. Yeah, but if you don't have the time to pour into the relationship is not going to grow.
Hmm.
And like you said, we're all evolving, we're all growing at different rates, right? You might be at a place where your career is taking off, the other person's
Yep.
career not taking off. But how do you sit down when both people are busy and create a space? That's what I talked about earlier, creating a space for this evolution. How can I help you as you're going into this next chapter in your life? How can you help me as I'm not necessarily going to this next chapter in my life with your career, but are you comfortable with it? Are you
Yep.
supportive? Because if you're
Yep.
not supportive in those spaces, then the relationship isn't growing. And at the end of the day, we're talking about that jar of sand where the relationship is supposed to grow. So,
But yeah, 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 I like that. I think one of the things that is important to note is that, like, you have to be at the same place.
yeah.
You don't have to be at the same place in life, but you
Hmm.
have to, like, a relationship, right? Is an act. Like, it's something
Hmm.
that it takes intention, purpose, like, and if you're not there and you're with someone who is there, it's very difficult to make that relationship work.
Hmm.
Right, because what tends to happen is the one person who has intention
Hmm.
spends so much effort and time trying to make it work, right, that it becomes exhausting.
Right.
And then with exhaustion, comes content,
Animosity.
and
Hmm.
animosity is
Yep.
created, and then next thing you know, you're focused on, like, other things, trying to force a
Hmm.
person to see what the effort that you're putting in. So
Hmm.
so it's really important that part, that you're in sync on. Like, I don't care where you are in life
Hmm.
whatsoever, because I've seen people, like, I'm extremely busy, but I guarantee you that I make time for my family. And so I think it's not an excuse, and people tend to make it an excuse, like, oh, I'm so busy with this, I'm doing this, I'm doing 10 things. It's like,
You're
right,
choosing
well,
to be
so
busy with
you're
those things.
choosing, yeah, what's important,
Yeah.
what's most
What's
important to
important to
you.
you? Yep.
Yeah, because I tell this, and I'll tell this to my wife too, when we're talking about, like, different initiatives we want to get started, or
Hmm.
there's a new business we want to do or
Hmm.
something. I'm
Hmm.
saying, Okay, honey, let's just remember that you can't give 100% to everything.
Yeah.
So let's talk about now what we're willing to sacrifice,
Right.
right? And so that's important
So let
because
me ask you this question with that sacrifice. Is it ever what you talked about earlier, we were talking about relationship. Is it ever a sacrifice from dating or building that, you know, that growth with each other, if that makes any sense?
is there,
As
well,
you
you
all are
can't,
creating these different initiatives in life, is
yes,
it
there's,
ever taking away sacrifice from the actual family relationship?
it could, but we talk
Okay.
about it,
Okay.
right? Because like it's going to. There's
Hmm.
no there's no way around it. Like, and so one of the things I'll tell you about is the discussion is around like whether we want to have other kids or not, right? And it's
Okay.
like, well, that's an option, but here's what we sacrifice if we do that,
Hmm.
right? And so
Hmm.
there's a pros and a cons to both. And creating life is just beautiful,
Okay.
but there's a sacrifice that has to be realized before you make the decision. And
Hmm.
so when you have that conversation about those particular topics,
Right.
then if you're not talking about the sacrifice that's been made, then you're literally, just throwing your relationship up in the wind, right?
Hmm.
Because I can tell you that there has never been a person in the history of the earth that has spent 100% for everything that they've done. 100% at
Hmm.
work,
Hmm.
100% in
Hmm.
relationship, 100% in hobbies, 100% with friends. It doesn't exist. So if
Right.
you're someone that says like I'm 100% committed to work, then that means you have no
No
time,
time for anything else.
right,
Right.
for anything else. And so you need to, and that's totally fine.
That's
But
fine. Yeah.
you need to be, that needs to be a realistic statement on your part. Like, well, okay, so now that I know that, I know I cannot be in a committed relationship. You
Mm.
can't say, I would like to be in a committed relationship, get married, have
Yep.
kids, give
And be 100% in work.
110%. Right. And also want to be the next Oprah Winfrey
Right.
or the
Right.
next,
So let's
whomever,
start right.
Steve Harvey.
So let me start right there with that, because you're going somewhere deeper than that. What about, being in the space of dating, right? I hear women nowadays say this all the time. I can have it all.
That's not true.
So so
Like it literally is not true. Like
okay.
I'll put this, it's a good example for women. So I'm talking to this person and she's a single mother.
Right.
And she's saying to
This is
me,
a serious situation. Okay.
I can't find a man.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, what, how are you looking? Like, well, it's like, I don't have time for that. And it's like,
Right.
so how do you expect, to find love if you're so busy? And again, not judging you, you have a
Right.
child,
Mm-hmm.
you're working, you're professional, you're doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
But how would you expect to find a man if you're not dedicating any time for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not dedicating any time to be social,
Right.
if you're not dedicating, whether it's in, I'm not talking about social, like whether it's in church or whether it's out with
Mm-hmm.
girlfriends or whether it's online community, wherever, if you're not
Mm-hmm.
dedicating any time, tell me how can you find a man? You can't just say there are no men out there and you can't find a man if
Not
you're not
doing
dedicating the time. That's how serious it is.
it. Mm-hmm.
That's called intention. And
Right.
so just as intentional as you are with your child and your work, you got to be intentional if you want to find a partner. That's just
Mm-hmm.
how life works.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think, the idea that women or men can do everything, right, is false. Right. But I can
Well,
tell you this. Now, if you say to me, I can achieve anything, I can achieve anything that I want to achieve, true. If you want to be successful and you want to be a doctor, you
mm-hmm.
absolutely can achieve that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you want to be a housewife, you absolutely can achieve that. Right.
Right.
If you want to be an engineer, you can absolutely achieve that. If you want to be the next great cyclist, you can achieve that. Right. But you can't do all four of those things at once.
Mm-mm. You got to
That's
sacrifice
impossible.
something.
You have to sacrifice something,
So
right?
where did
Now,
it come from in society though, when women are saying this and they feel that way? I've heard that from so many different people, right? You have been married, right? You've been married what, 4 years now, but most of your life you have been in committed relationships as an adult. So with that said, I think you can really speak on it. Where is this? what society is saying is, why do you feel like, because when I talk to some people and they'll say, well, that's not what I really mean, but they really mean I can go hard with work, I can go hard with my family, I can go hard with losing 200 pounds and I want to lose it in 3 months, this, that, and the third. But then, hey, why is relationships, and I will say relationship with a man in this space, they can't find a man, why is that like looked down upon? Because everything else they have, why you feel like in relationships when they're trying to like say a man, why is that frowned upon or not put forth enough effort to, if that makes any
But
sense?
yeah, but I would say to them that they didn't achieve all of that at once.
Fair.
So they took the time to go back to school and
Mm-hmm.
focus to get this career. Then they took the time in that career to dedicate to it. And then if they want to be an author, let's say, or something, they took time to write that book, and like they weren't doing everything at once,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when it comes to a relationship, then you have to say, now it's time for me to
Mm-hmm.
be in a relationship. And I'll tell this story. And this is again, this is sort of back in the day, and kind of a different mindset,
Mm.
but talking with a friend of mine who was a young lady, and she talked, and we were young, and she talked with intention, and she
Mm.
was extremely successful in her life. She had
Mm-hmm.
gone to school, grad school, whatever. She had worked and been successful in her career. Then she started a business.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember having a conversation with her, and the what next was, now I want a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then guess what? Her focus and intention was on finding a
Same.
husband.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, finding a committed relationship, then turning that committed relationship into a partnership and a marriage, and then having kids, right? So now she has it all. She has her business, she has her family, right? She has the love of her life, and she has her happiness.
So
So
what do you think that
she didn't
what do
do it
you
all.
think she did? What do you think that she did?
I think on each one of those things she wanted to achieve, she focused on them. Not at the same time. She was intentional about it. She said, during this period, I'm going to be focused on school. During this period, I'm going to focus on working in
Mm-hmm.
corporate America, whatever. In this period, I'm going to focus on starting my business. In this period, I'm going to focus on my relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And then on this period, then I'm going to focus on having kids. And now
Mm-hmm.
she's able to sit back and she has all of that going for herself. But every single thing that she did was with intention, and it was really purposeful about like how she was going to achieve it. It wasn't like, I'm going to be in school and creating a business and creating a
And
relationship. Like, that's impossible. And then we wonder why we're exhausted and why we say statements
mm-hmm.
like, there just isn't anyone out here. No, you just haven't spent enough time,
And the work.
right, to
Mm-hmm.
really focus on finding that person out here. You just can't have it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I think one of those things that is really difficult, I would assume, in the dating world today is to
Mm-hmm.
be someone who has intention and dealing with the society today where we're multitasking so many things, and we're so concerned with our outward profile. That would be really difficult, I think, I think today, because I heard something the other day, and it was saying looking at someone's status is determined. I'm sorry, not status. Looking at someone's, I forget what it's called, but it's
Social
like
media.
when, yeah, it's like if someone is connected to you or something, I guess. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that person isn't connected to following. That person isn't following them no more. They must be breaking up.
Mm.
Like,
That's,
that
yeah.
is dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
because I think, this is what social media creates, is like this idea that who you are is what's represented online,
Right.
including now dating status.
Right.
And I just think, we're getting in very, very dangerous times. And again, that's why I said, if you found someone who you felt like is a person who you would like to potentially create a real relationship with,
Mm-hmm.
I take a little bit of a break off social media to see if that's real and see if it really works
Mm-hmm.
for you guys.
Question I asked you before, we talked about it online. I would love to hear what you have to say now. Is there any coming back to people seriously dating for marriage?
What do you mean by that?
To your point when you mentioned earlier, I know that may have been back in the day, or if that was something serious about somebody saying they were single and they couldn't find anybody, or there are no men out here, or we hear a lot of the times in society that people aren't really dating with a purpose. we go back to what our thing is, right? We have to
Mhm,
You have to be an individual person and be whole. Again, not perfect, whole, to be able
mhm,
to go into something that's is a little that's serious.
mhm.
Um, do you feel like, and I believe 15 years or before social media really kind of like took off, I think people kind of did that to a certain degree, and that
Mhm,
wasn't really put out there because we just had the news.
mhm,
Now there's so many different news platforms, so many different things, and people listen to that they don't even know what those people do in their own personal lives. In that
mhm,
sense, like when you
mhm.
think about it, like, do you feel like we're able to get back to that place where people are seriously dating before social media?
I really, really, really want to say yes, but what I see outwardly is that's going to be very hard. Because I hear young people, and young people are always the sign of where we are in society today, right? Because they're the future, and I hear a lot of young people, make comments like, I'm not really looking for marriage. And one of the things I think is really telling too is young people are saying like, yeah, I don't think I want kids, right? So if you look at the decline, like the media would like for you to think that, African Americans are having all of these kids, but the reality is it's been a steady decline in African American births, right? So when you look at the true stats, because what also true is African American has the highest rate of um, non-marriage or divorce, right? So when you look at those stats, that's real. And so I want to say yes, in my heart, because I'm
Right,
an advocate for relationships.
right.
Because I think that we're not, as human beings, we're not on this earth to be
To be
alone.
not, no, not
Like
a,
that journey is not intended to be, traveled alone. Um, but I don't see the light. Anything could
mhm,
change, but I
right.
don't see the light. And I think what happens is people like myself who are in loving relationships, we create the communities of
Mhm,
individuals
right.
who
Mhm,
support that, and so then now there becomes like an isolation. And so
mhm,
now what you have is you have a community, the people who want to be married or be in committed relationships in whatever form are over here. And then
mhm.
you have all of these people who are loving their life or dating, or they don't believe in committed relationships or whatever. They're a part of the dating pool. So now you have all these people that are just dating, and you're
But
just dating, right?
it's more them. Let's say it's more
There's a
of
lot
it's
more of
less
them.
than you than it is of
Yeah,
them, and
a
those are the
lot more of
ones who
them.
may not be as serious, who are creating all of the the babies possibly,
Mhm,
who aren't having the families. When you were talking about it, it almost kind of like goes back to, for me, when we had this myth of like our neighborhood as African Americans,
mhm,
and it's like when you made it, you moved out of the neighborhood,
mhm,
right? You moved out, you kind of created your own space and your own neighborhood for yourself of those people, and whatever those people are, making it out of the hood. And there's so
mhm,
many other people when we had integration, right? I'm sorry, segregation, where we had to kind of figure it out amongst ourselves. Where
mhm,
sometimes we're both old enough to remember you couldn't go down the street if your grandmother, aunt, or even teacher without being held accountable. So
mhm,
what I'm hearing you say is there's no level of accountability with everybody else. So we're holding a level of accountability with ourselves, which is a smaller group. But what about
mhm.
everybody else? And
Yeah.
so how do we get that? I think the only way it can happen for me and me understanding it is we have to be able to go into those spaces and be able to have those conversations with everybody else, because society said that's crazy anyway. However, I also know that the people who made it out or have those relationships, they're working extremely hard to actually have their relationships. So
Mhm,
how the hell do you balance the two and then give, only a small portion? Because what I'm also hearing you say, a lot of the things that we're talking about, it takes a lot of work.
mhm,
It's a lot of work. It's not easy. It may look easy from somebody looking inside out, but it's hard to, hey, this plan works, and we have a plan and a regimen every week. and we stick to that regiment every week. And if we decide to get out of that regiment, it's because it's for a small period of time, but it's not enough time that needs to be in those other situations. So
Yep.
that can then manifest and grow because you also have your community. And that's the same thing that happened with people who kind of got out of the hood and they had their own lives. So
Hmm.
I don't unless society changes and says something different, but
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to overcome because I think again, like me mentioning that, and you kind of talk about that is like creating that village is
mhm,
important. Like so, things haven't changed as far as dating. People think they have, but it really hasn't because you really think about it, social media is just images and stuff that's on a computer.
mhm,
But real life still is the same.
yeah,
And so like I know that to be true just because the village that I've been able to cultivate,
mhm.
we it's still the same things I can remember my
When we
parents
was yeah,
doing,
yeah,
when I was young, and the
mhm,
kids, when they kind of their principles and ideas are being influenced by the representation of the people within this group, right?
right,
So they see that relationships are things, or the commitment and how you commit to a relationship, and again, beyond just romantic, just like a mother and a father relationship with the child, a cousin and a auntie relationship with the child, like all of
mhm,
these things, the friends of a friend, like like my kids know that within our circle, that if any of those adults see them out,
mhm.
like,
They can put
they
hands
know
on
that they're an
them
extension
of a
of,
family. Yeah.
yes, of
Mhm,
the parents, right? And vice
mhm,
vice versa. I think that's really, really important. And so I
mm,
think the only thing that we can do as that community is continue to be represent that, right? Right. Like, and again, I think the youth is important. So talking to youth about the importance of that, I think is going to be important. Showing a relationship, talking about marriage, like talking about the importance of that. And I think it's super important because I really love, like, I love, and I really have a soft spot for the role that like black women have had to play, over the last 40 plus 40, 50
mhm,
years, right? And I think that is, I obviously I have some conspiracy theories about that being an intentional,
right.
but the fact that our mothers have had to try and play both roles, which by the way is impossible, right? Like something is lost, right? Like, but a mother can be an amazing, human being at times. And I
Mhm,
think it's unfair for them to have to play those roles, but they've had to play those roles. And I think that's when the disintegration of the relationship start to happen because, again, like we talked about earlier, if I look at my mother and she had to go work, sometimes work one or two jobs, and had to provide for the family, had to be the mother, and had to be the protector for the family, and had to do that. She didn't even have time for herself to date, right? And
mhm,
so if the father is outside of the picture, or if one, let's say no gender, if one of the parents was outside the picture, it's very difficult for the other parent to play all roles to a child.
mhm,
And I think that, you know, also talking about that is important to talk to young people that may not see that today, right?
mhm,
But they should know that it's important to have those because there's a part that is missing. And
mhm,
when you grow up to be an adult, you don't realize it until you become an adult and you seek therapy, that
mhm,
there is a part that was missing, and that
mhm,
you've been either a seeking, to reclaim that part or find that part, or you never knew it was missing, but something was always missing, wrong,
mhm,
felt wrong. Like, those things are important. So I think just being a representative of that, talking about that, and I stand on that. My beliefs, those are my beliefs. Other people may believe something totally different, and that's fine too. I think again, that's why it's important that we have our village. So I know that,
mhm,
when I have my village, and I know that when I'm talking about purpose. And even
mhm,
if we don't see eye to eye on everything, I know
mhm.
everyone within that village is made up of, of
Same kind of
similar
cloth.
stuff,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, like we all share in that, right? And
Right.
within our faith, and we really believe
Mhm.
that this is the route that we want to go. So I think that's what we could do, because I think going and talking to a room full of people who really really believe that,
Hmm.
like, marriage isn't important, starting families aren't important. If they really believe that, then I think it's really difficult to change that person's
Hmm.
mind, and it's their right to believe that, right? And it's okay for them to live that lifestyle. I think just being a representative, being true to ourselves, is important, and I think that's where we kind of can give, like, to others. It's just like, oh, okay, they actually work. That does. You can be successful and
Hmm.
have a family and do these amazing things. So I love when people have these podcasts, and there's several really good podcasts that are starting to come out now. And like Black Love, is a
Hmm.
really really great platform, I think, where
Hmm.
they talk about the ideas around Black love, and there's many different faces of that love. But the thing that is stands true to that platform is togetherness and the structure. And however it looks different is one thing, but that togetherness and the structure, and working through troubled times, and
Hmm.
growing together, and building a village, and all of those things still remain the same. And so I think we have to be supportive of platforms like that.
Yeah, we got to keep, and my show necessarily, I think the things we talk about is so entrenched in who we are. And I'm hearing more people talk about it over and over again. But on this podcast, Brother to Brother show, we are really trying to talk to other men like ourselves to understand, like, this is a thing. We're not going anywhere. They will try to shut us up and not allow us to speak about. There are relationships that do work. And my last question to you is almost going back to the very beginning, um, and talk about the actions of it, right? What actions do you actually do? So, how did you create a space for dating or preparing yourself for seriously being married? In your marriage now, like,
My
what do
marriage
you
now,
feel
yeah.
like? What do you feel like you had to do seriously to prepare yourself? Because, like you said, it was a friendship.
Yeah.
We know that story. But actually dating with purpose, and I hear
Yep.
people say they're dating with purpose all the time, but actually actions, not necessarily. Because I think I had to kind of change up even how I was saying things. I think um, you can say you want it, you can say you really want to do something, you can say you want to date with intent and things like that. But if you've never seen or heard what intent looks like, it's like, I think it's just a switch that you put on,
Hmm.
not necessarily being prepared. And I had to go from saying, um, do you want to be married, into transitioning into having conversation with people and saying, are you prepared?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't believe
Yeah.
you can just walk into marriage. So I think some of that preparedness means, have you done the work on yourself? I
Yep.
think some of that prepared means, do you even know how to date? Do you know how to take a woman out on a date? And as a woman, are you able to make yourself available for a man to take you out on the date? Like,
Mhm.
like having the mindset. It's not just you saying you want to do it, but having the mindset to prepare yourself. But go back 15 years, well,
Yeah.
10 years ago,
Yep.
and in that space, like, what would you say to people out there they need to do for creating that space? Like, we've talked about it, like, even I know you've already created the space in your marriage for dating,
Mhm.
but what about, like, just in trying to initially start dating?
Well, I do want to point. I do want to go back to one of the things that you made a comment on that I think I want to elaborate on as well, is like being prepared to move on. Like, if you're saying that you're going to prepare yourself, and you're going to be in a space where you know where you want to be, and you're intentional about where you want to be, the next step is, are you willing to walk away from those who don't share the same beliefs, sentiments, are prepared, are ready?
Mhm.
Like, because that's the hard thing,
Yeah.
right? The hard thing is, because what happens is you tend to be alone a lot more,
Hmm.
because what you find is like not everyone is on that same journey, and not everyone is at that same space and that same level. But you have to ask yourself, are you willing to just be alone and be happy until you find that? Or are you willing to add additional hardship by being with individuals longer than you should and continuously doing that even though you know they're not at that space. So
Hmm.
that's the next phase. Like and
Right.
that's a that's something that's extremely hard, right? And
Yeah.
I think for me, coming off, I was coming 10 years ago, I was coming off another, I was coming off an unattended relationship. I'll
Hmm.
phrase it that way, where, you know, um, I was in a date space, just a date space, and again, things happen, and then that unintentional sort of like, oh, you're in a relationship, and so I made, I wanted to make sure that after that relationship ended, that I just had time to myself. I just wanted to be by myself. I didn't even date. Like, like I didn't date for a while. I was by myself. And it really helped me to reflect on maybe things that, I was manifesting. Like I don't think that anything is a mistake. I think that everything is either a lesson or a purpose. And I think so for me, it was more of, I took all those lessons that I had learned from the past and then I made alterations in my life. And so one of the things that I think was key for me during that time was taking away like physicality in a relationship. And I really want to focus on just generally meeting people.
Hmm.
I just wanted to meet people. And I
Hmm.
just wanted to be like, I didn't want to go home with people. I didn't go out to see people. Like when I went out with my friends, I really went out with my friends. I
Hmm.
didn't go out with my friends to
Hmm.
holla and to talk. Like I literally went out to enjoy my friends. And then I found like during that, I was like meeting different
Hmm.
people. Um, but even though I was meeting different people, like I was still serious about like, hey, I'm not looking to date. But then I also wasn't like adding like, but I'm down to kick,
Hmm.
like down to kick it. Like I was like, no, I want to be friends. We're gonna be friends, and like, let's just be friends. And
Yeah.
I found that very like rewarding because there was no pressure. And so like because we weren't going there, it was good. Like, I didn't have any, like there was nothing there. Now there were a lot of lonely nights. I would
Mm-hmm.
definitely say that. Like that's a lonely journey. But I think what happens is you start to see people at real intentions.
Hmm.
You start to see people who they really are because now
Right.
all the guards are down. They're not trying to impress because you're not dating. No one
Hmm.
is date like, what I'm saying, but you're having a really good time. And I think once you start to let that guard down, then you start to see who people really are. So then you can start like, and then what happens is then life opens up. Then it's more
Hmm.
like you don't even have to really do the work, right?
Hmm.
Because then that person is already in your life. And then you start to cultivate something that is deeper than a friendship. And then one day you guys realize like this is this is more than this is more than a friendship. Like, and because you have a friend, you talk to friends, and so
Hmm.
you're having open conversation always anyway. And then so it's an easy transition into the romance side of it, right? Because it's the friendship is already friendship is the core of any successful relationship. I'm telling
Hmm.
you 100%. If you The friendship opens up all the discussion because you're not afraid, and you're not afraid to protect all the bad stuff in the past, that the baggage that you bring, and like all of the,
Hmm.
it's already there, it's out, that's your friend you're talking to. So I would just say that that's how we kind of get back to that, like we get back to just, you open yourself up, you allow yourself to be vulnerable, to be alone, and that's a painful existence. But whether you have to come closer to God, whether you have to come closer within yourself, it really helps for you to develop and be open to like those real type of relationships. And I think that's worked for me. And when I talk to other couples who have been together, like it started as friends. Like like on like couples who have lasted. Even I even think about like couples that I've been friends with over 20 years. Like
The friendship is
when I
definitely there.
think of their story, it started as friends. You know?
So I want us to leave on that note because we're about to cut off. But I want to say thank you so much. Preparation is so important, and we're going to get back to this next time with us. We love you, like we say, and we want to continue to have these conversations. We'll have a part 2 to creating a space for love and dating. Rio's been one of my loyal podcasters for so long, but I finally got him on the show to talk a lot about his relationship and open up about that, because he does it all the time behind the scenes. But this is the reason why we're here, is brothers that really be able to have conversations with other men who may be seeking that type of love and understanding, so we can develop these relationships. So next time, I'm KMO, life coach, tomorrow's man. We'll see you next time. Peace out. Thank you, listeners and viewers, for coming onto the show. You can find us at tomorrowsmen.com, on Facebook at Tomorrow's Men, and on Instagram at Tomorrow's Men. Please click and subscribe to the button below. I'm your host, KMO. Until we meet again, know we love you, work with us, be with us, and know we're coming from the heart.